What if one of the most powerful stories ever recorded in human history wasn't just a miracle, but a glimpse of a technology so advanced that we still don't understand it today? Imagine standing at the edge of a raging river, water crashing forward with unstoppable force, stretching for miles, cutting off your path completely. There is no bridge, no boat, no way across. Behind you, an entire nation waits. Ahead of you lies a promise, a land said to be destined for your people. And in that moment, the impossible happens. The water stops, not slows down, not redirects, but stops completely, as if controlled by an unseen force. The river rises, the flow reverses, and the ground beneath becomes dry. Thousands begin to walk forward, crossing safely through what should have been certain death. This is the story of the Jordan River, a 200-mile waterway that once stood as a final barrier between the Israelites and the land they believed was promised to them. But the deeper you look into this event, the more it begins to feel less like a simple miracle and more like something far more mysterious. According to ancient accounts, this event occurred around 1400 BC, during a time when the Israelites had already spent decades wandering through the wilderness. Their journey had been long, uncertain, and filled with challenges. But now, they had reached the edge of the Jordan River, the final obstacle standing between them and their destination. Leading them was Joshua, the successor of Moses, tasked with guiding his people into a new chapter of their history. And at the center of this moment stood one object, the Ark of the Covenant, described as a sacred chest covered in gold, carried by priests, and believed to contain the tablets of the Ten Commandments. The Ark was more than just a religious symbol. It was said to represent the presence and power of God itself. But what happened next has raised questions that continue to challenge both historians and scientists even today. As the story goes, Joshua commanded the priests to carry the ark forward, stepping directly into the rushing waters of the river. And the moment their feet touched the water, everything changed. The current halted, the flow ceased. The river piled up in one direction, creating what ancient texts describe as a wall of water. Downstream, the riverbed dried completely. What had been a powerful, unstoppable force of nature suddenly became a silent, controlled pathway. One by one, then thousands at a time, the Israelites crossed safely to the other side. No boats, no bridges, just dry land where water should have been. To many, this has always been seen as a divine miracle, a direct act of supernatural intervention. But in recent years, some researchers and theorists have begun to ask a different question. What if the people who recorded this event were simply describing what they saw without understanding how it worked? Because when you strip away the religious interpretation and focus only on the physical description, something very unusual begins to emerge. A river stopping, water rising and holding its shape, a dry path forming instantly. These are not random occurrences. They suggest control, precise, powerful control over natural forces. And that leads to an idea that sounds almost impossible at first, but becomes harder to ignore the more you think about it. What if the Ark of the Covenant wasn't just a sacred object, but a form of advanced technology? Think about what it would take to stop a river. Water is one of the most powerful forces on Earth. Even today, with all our engineering advancements, controlling a massive flow of water requires dams, barriers, and complex systems. But here, according to the account, it happened instantly. No construction, no visible mechanism, just the presence of the ark, and the waters obeyed. Some scientists have proposed that extremely powerful winds could, under the right conditions, push water aside and temporarily expose land beneath. This phenomenon, known as wind set-down, has been observed in certain parts of the world. But for it to occur at the scale described in this story, the force would need to be immense, far beyond anything naturally occurring in a stable, controlled manner. Others have suggested seismic activity, an earthquake temporarily blocking the river upstream. But again, this would be unpredictable, chaotic, and unlikely to create a perfectly timed and stable crossing for thousands of people. The precision described in the story doesn't match random natural events. It suggests intention. And this is where the mystery deepens. Because the Ark of the Covenant is not described as an ordinary object, ancient texts speak of it with a sense of fear and reverence. It was not to be touched casually. Only specific individuals were allowed to carry it, and even then, under strict conditions. There are accounts suggesting that those who mishandled it suffered severe consequences, sometimes instantly. Some descriptions even imply that it emitted some kind of energy, something powerful enough to affect the physical world around it. While these descriptions are often interpreted symbolically, they begin to take on a different meaning when viewed through a technological lens. Could the ark have been some kind of energy source? A device capable of generating powerful fields or forces? Something that could interact with the environment in ways we still don't fully understand? If that sounds like science fiction, consider this. Many technologies we use today would seem like magic to people living just a few hundred years ago. Electricity, radio waves, wireless communication, all invisible forces shaping our world. Now imagine encountering something far beyond even our current level of understanding. How would you describe it? Most likely, in the only way you could, through the language and beliefs of your time. You would call it divine. You would call it a miracle. But what if it wasn't? The idea that ancient civilizations may have had access to advanced knowledge of technology is not new. Across the world, there are structures, artifacts, and records that continue to challenge our understanding of past. Precision stonework, astronomical alignments, unexplained engineering feats. These are not isolated mysteries. They form a pattern. And within that pattern, the story of the Ark of the Covenant stands out as one of the most intriguing examples. Because unlike physical structures, the Ark is missing. It has never been definitively found. No confirmed location, no verified remains. It simply disappears from the historical record, leaving behind only descriptions and stories. And that raises another question. If the Ark truly possessed some kind of advanced capability, what happened to it? Was it hidden, destroyed, or is it still out there, waiting to be discovered? The absence of physical evidence makes it easy to dismiss the story as purely symbolic. But the consistency of the descriptions, the level of detail, and the impact it had on those who recorded it suggests that something real may have occurred. Something they witnessed, something they experienced firsthand. And whatever it was, it left a lasting impression powerful enough to be remembered for thousands of years. Now imagine being there, standing among thousands, watching the river stop, feeling the ground beneath your feet where water once rushed, hearing the silence where there should have been chaos. Would you question it, or would you accept it as something beyond human understanding? Because for the people of that time, there was no framework to explain such an event in scientific terms. There was only belief, and through that belief, the story was preserved. But today, we have a different perspective. We have the ability to analyze, to question, to explore possibilities that go beyond traditional interpretations. And when we do, stories like this begin to take on a new dimension, not as simple myths or legends, but as potential record of events that we have yet to fully understand. The line between myth and history becomes blurred. The impossible becomes possible. And this is just one story, one moment in a much larger narrative filled with similar mysteries, events that defy explanation, artifacts that challenge logic, and structures that seem ahead of their time. The Ark of the Covenant may be one of the earliest examples of something that continues to appear throughout human history, the suggestion that there is more to our past than we currently know, that perhaps, at some point, knowledge existed that has since been lost or hidden. Because if the Ark truly had the power to stop a river, then it wasn't just a symbol of faith. It was something far more significant. Something capable of altering the physical world in a way that even today would be considered extraordinary. And if such a device existed once, who's to say it couldn't exist again? The deeper you explore these stories, the more questions begin to surface. And the more you realize that what we've been taught about ancient history may only be a fraction of the full picture. There are gaps, missing pieces that don't quite fit into the narrative we've accepted. And within those gaps lie possibilities that challenge everything we think we know. So the next time you hear about the parting of a river, ask yourself this. Was it truly a miracle? Or was it something else? Something real? Something powerful? Something we've simply forgotten how to explain? Because this is only the beginning. And the deeper we go, the more impossible it becomes. What if sound, something invisible, something we experience every second, could be powerful enough to destroy an entire city? Not through explosives, not through fire, but through pure vibration, controlled, focused, and unleashed with precision. It sounds like something out of a futuristic battlefield. Yet, thousands of years ago, there exists a story that describes exactly that. A city heavily fortified, protected by massive stone walls, collapsing instantly, not from attack, but from sound. No weapons striking the surface. No armies breaking through the gates. Just a strange ritual, followed by a moment that changed everything. This is the mystery of Jericho, a story that, when examined closely, begins to feel less like legend and more like a forgotten demonstration of power. Jericho was no ordinary city. Located near the Jordan Valley, it is considered one of the oldest continuously inhabited settlements in human history. Archaeological evidence suggests its origins date back as far as 1900 BC. Over time, it became a symbol of strength, protected by towering walls built to withstand invasion. For any ancient army, capturing a city like Jericho would have been nearly impossible without months, if not years, of siege warfare. But according to ancient texts, the Israelites didn't attack Jericho in any conventional way. Instead, they followed a set of instructions so unusual, so unexpected, that it has puzzled historians and researchers for generations. Under the leadership of Joshua, the Israelites approached the city, but rather than launching an immediate assault, they began to march around it. Once each day, they circled the walls in silence. No battle cries, no weapons raised, just movement. This continued for 6 days. Imagine the tension building inside the city. The people of Jericho watching from above, uncertain, confused, waiting for something to happen. But nothing did. Just the same silent march, repeated again and again. Then came the 7th day. This time, everything changed. Instead of circling the city once, the Israelites march around it 7 times. The repetition itself suggests preparation, something building, something aligning. And then, at the final moment, the silence broke. The priests lifted their horns, shofars, and blew them with force. At the same time, the entire population shouted together, creating a unified burst of sound. And according to the account, the walls collapsed instantly. Massive stone structures, built to withstand physical attack, fell as if struck by an invisible force. The city was exposed. The battle was over before it truly began. For centuries, this event has been described as a miracle, a divine act beyond human explanation. But in a world where science continues to uncover new possibilities, some have begun to ask a different question. What if there was a physical mechanism behind this event? What if the combination of sound, movement, and the presence of the Ark of the Covenant created something far more complex than we realize? Because when you look at it through a modern lens, the idea of sound causing structural damage is not as impossible as it once seemed. Sound is vibration, and vibration, when amplified and directed, can have powerful effects on physical objects. In fact, certain frequencies can cause materials to resonate, to vibrate in sync with the sound waves. When this resonance reaches a critical level, it can lead to structural failure. Glass shattering from a high-pitched note is a simple example. But scale that up, control it, intensify it, and the effect becomes far more significant. Today, we have technologies that use sound as a tool, even as a weapon. One such example is a long-range acoustic device, or LRAD, used by military and law enforcement. It can emit highly focused sound waves at extreme volumes, over 150 decibels. At that level, sound doesn't just hurt your ears, it affects your entire body. It can cause disorientation, nausea, even temporary loss of vision. Now imagine that kind of energy, but amplified further, focused not on people, but on structures. The idea of using sound to damage or destroy is no longer theoretical. It exists. So when we revisit the story of Jericho, a new possibility begins to emerge. What if the horns weren't just ceremonial instruments? What if they were part of a system, a trigger, a component in a larger mechanism? And what about the synchronized movement of thousands of people? Could the marching itself have played a role, creating rhythmic vibrations that built over time? And then there's the Ark of the Covenant, once again present at the center of the event. If, as some theories suggest, the Ark was capable of generating or amplifying energy, then its role in this event becomes even more significant. Imagine a device that could take sound waves, natural vibrations, and enhance them, focus them, direct them with precision. The horns produce the initial frequencies. The synchronized shout adds intensity, and the Ark acts as the amplifier, converting these inputs into a powerful, concentrated force. The result? A resonance strong enough to destabilize the very structure of the walls. It sounds extraordinary, But when you break it down into components, sound, vibration, amplification, it begins to align with principles we understand today. The difference of scale and control. Modern sonic technologies are still limited. They require complex equipment, power sources, and precise calibration. But what if, in the distant past, there existed a form of technology that achieved similar results in a more compact, integrated way? Something that could harness natural forces and manipulate them efficiently? Skeptics argue that the fall of Jericho can be explained by natural causes. Perhaps an earthquake weakened the walls, making them vulnerable. And while seismic activity is a possibility, it doesn't fully explain the timing described in the account. The walls didn't collapse randomly. They fell at a specific moment, after a specific sequence of actions. That level of synchronization suggests intention, not coincidence. It suggests that the event was triggered, not accidental. There's also the psychological aspect to consider. Imagine being inside the city, watching this ritual unfold. Days of silent marching, building tension, followed by a sudden explosion of sound. The fear, the uncertainty, it would have been overwhelming. But fear alone doesn't bring down walls. Something physical had to occur, something strong enough to break through stone. And this brings us back to a recurring theme, ancient knowledge that may be more advanced than we assume. Across different civilizations, there are references to sound being used in unusual ways. In some traditions, sound is described as a creative force, capable of shaping matter, influencing the environment. While these ideas are often dismissed as symbolic, they raise an interesting question. What if there was a deeper understanding of acoustics, of vibration, that has been lost over time? Because the story of Jericho is not just about a city falling. It's about a method, a process that, if real, represents a level of control over physical forces that we are only beginning to explore. It challenges the assumption that ancient people were limited to simple tools and basic techniques. It suggests that there may have been moments in history when knowledge existed that surpassed what we currently attribute to those time periods. And once again, the Ark of the Covenant stands at the center of it all, present at the river crossing, present at Jericho, always associated with events that defy conventional explanation. If it was merely symbolic, why is it consistently linked to such powerful occurrences? Why does it appear at moments where the impossible becomes possible? Perhaps because it wasn't just a symbol. Perhaps it was a key, a device, a tool, something capable of interacting with the world in ways that were misunderstood but carefully documented. And if that's the case, then the story of Jericho is not just a tale of faith or victory. It's a record, a fragmented glimpse into a capability that once existed. But like the Ark itself, that knowledge seems to have vanished. No clear instructions, no surviving technology, just stories, passed down through generations, waiting to be interpreted. And as we continue to develop our own technologies, exploring sound, energy, and their potential, we may be unknowingly moving closer to rediscovering something that was once known. Because the idea of sound as a weapon is no longer fiction. It's real, it's measurable, and it's evolving, which makes the story of Jericho even more intriguing. Not as an isolated event, but as part of a larger pattern, one that hints at a past where the boundaries of possibility were very different from what we've been taught. So the next time you hear about the walls of Jericho falling, don't just think of it as a miracle. Think of it as a question, a challenge to what we believe about history, technology, and the limits of human capability. Because if sound could bring down a city once, what else was possible? And more importantly, what have we forgotten? What if everything we've been taught about ancient technology is completely wrong? What if the greatest civilizations of the past weren't limited by primitive tools, but instead possessed knowledge so advanced that even today, we struggle to explain it? Imagine standing inside one of the most iconic structures ever built, the Great Pyramid of Giza, towering above the desert, constructed from millions of massive stone blocks, each one cut in place with astonishing precision. For centuries, we've been told a simple story, that ancient Egyptians built these wonders using basic tools, copper chisels, stone hammers, and sheer human labor. But the deeper researchers have looked, the more that explanation begins to fall apart. Because hidden within these ancient stones are details that shouldn't exist. Let's start with the material itself. Many of the structures in ancient Egypt weren't just built from limestone, which is relatively soft and easier to shape. They used granite, And not just small pieces, but enormous blocks weighing tens, sometimes even hundreds of tons. Granite is one of the hardest natural stones on Earth. Even with modern steel tools, cutting and shaping granite requires significant effort, specialized equipment, and time. Now imagine trying to do that with copper, a metal far softer than the stone itself. It doesn't make sense. In fact, by all known physical standards, it should be nearly impossible. And yet, when archaeologists began closely examining these ancient sites, they discovered something extraordinary. Drill holes, perfectly round, deeply cut into granite, showing signs of precision that rival modern machining. Inside these holes, there are spiral grooves, evenly spaced, consistent in depth and angle. These are not random marks. They are the result of controlled, mechanical motion, something rotating at high speed, applying steady pressure. In some cases, the grooves are so fine and uniform that they suggest a level of control beyond what we would expect even from early industrial tools. This wasn't just speculation. In the late 19th century, British archaeologist Sir Flinders Petrie conducted detailed studies of these features. He wasn't looking for grand monuments. He was focused on the smallest details. And what he found challenged everything he believed about ancient engineering. Petrie carefully measured the drill marks, the grooves, the precision of the cuts. His conclusion? The tools used to create these features were far more advanced than anything the ancient Egyptians were supposed to have. One of the most striking examples was a granite core sample, a cylindrical piece extracted from a drilled hole. The surface of this core showed clear, consistent spiral markings, indicating that the drilling process advanced at a steady, measurable rate. Based on his analysis, Petrie estimated that the drill penetrated the granite at a speed that would require a force and efficiency far beyond what could be achieved with copper tools and manual labor. In simple terms, the numbers didn't add up. Decades later, engineer and machinist Christopher Dunn decided to test these claims. Instead of relying on theory, he attempted to recreate the process using the tools and methods traditionally attributed to the ancient Egyptians. He constructed a copper tube drill, used sand as an abrasive, just as historians suggested, and began drilling into granite. The process was slow, exhausting, and far from precise. After hours of work, he managed to produce a core sample. But when he examined it under a microscope, the results were clear. The surface markings were irregular, inconsistent, lacking precision seen in the ancient samples. Then came the comparison. Dunn placed his modern experimental core next to a replica of the ancient one. The difference was undeniable. The ancient sample showed clean, sharp, deeply defined grooves, evidence of a process that was not only faster but significantly more precise. Whatever method had been used thousands of years ago, it wasn't the one we've been taught. And this is where the mystery truly begins. Because if the ancient Egyptians didn't use simple tools, then what did they use? This question becomes even more complex when you look beyond drill holes and examine the overall construction. Massive stone blocks, some weighing over 100 tons, were cut with flat surfaces so precise that even today, engineers struggle to replicate them. The joints between stones are so tight that you can't fit a blade between them. The alignment is exact, the angles consistent, the surface is smooth beyond what manual shaping should allow. These are not just signs of skill, they are signs of precision engineering. In modern construction, achieving this level of accuracy requires advanced machinery, diamond-tipped tools, high-speed saws, computer-guided systems. Yet these ancient structures were built thousands of years before such technologies supposedly existed. So how did they do it? Some researchers have suggested that the ancient builders may have had access to harder materials, perhaps even diamonds, used as cutting tools. Petrie himself proposed this idea, noting that the precision of the cuts implied the use of something far stronger than copper. But there's a problem. No evidence of diamond tools has ever been found at these sites. No remains, no fragments, nothing to support the theory. It's as if the tools existed, and then disappeared completely. Others have proposed alternative techniques, using advanced abrasives, specialized methods of shaping stone over long periods of time. But these explanations often fail to account for consistency and efficiency observed. It's not just about cutting stone, it's about doing it repeatedly, accurately, and on a massive scale. The pyramids alone contain over 2 million stone blocks. That level of production requires more than just patience, it requires a system. And then there are the tool marks themselves. Across various sites in Egypt, researchers have identified patterns that resemble those produced by modern machines. Straight, parallel lines, curved cuts that suggest rotational movement, even markings that appear to be the result of large circular saws. In one location, a granite block shows a cut so deep and smooth that some experts believe it could only have been made by a saw several meters in diameter, a saw that, according to conventional history, should not have existed. This idea has sparked intense debate. Mainstream archaeologists argue that these interpretations are exaggerated, that the marks can be explained through known techniques, that the ancient Egyptians were simply more skilled than we give them credit for. And there's no doubt they were incredibly skilled. Their achievements are undeniable. But skill alone doesn't explain everything. It doesn't explain the speed, the precision, the consistency. It doesn't explain the evidence that points to methods beyond what we currently understand. And this brings us to a crossroads. Either we are underestimating ancient civilizations to a significant degree, or there is something missing from the story, something we haven't discovered yet, something that could change our entire understanding of history. Because if even a fraction of these observations are accurate, then it suggests that ancient people may have had access to technologies, or at least techniques, that have been lost over time, not necessarily identical to modern machines, but advanced in their own way, efficient, precise, purpose-built, and this idea doesn't exist in isolation. Similar mysteries appear in other parts of the world. In South America, at sites like Pumapunku, stones are cut with such precision that they fit together like interlocking puzzle pieces. In some cases, the edges are perfectly straight, the angles exact, the surfaces smooth beyond explanation. Again, no clear evidence of the tools used. Just the result. Standing there, challenging everything we think we know. So what happened? If these technologies existed, why did they disappear? Why is there no clear record of their development, their use, their evolution? History typically shows progress, a gradual advancement from simple to complex. But in these cases, we see something different. We see complexity appearing suddenly, without a clear path leading up to it. And then, just as suddenly, it's gone. Some suggest that knowledge was lost due to catastrophic events, natural disasters, societal collapse, the fall of civilizations. Others believe that certain knowledge may have been restricted, controlled, passed down only to a select few. And then there are those who propose a more controversial idea, that ancient civilizations may have received knowledge from an external source, not developed over time, but introduced. It's a bold claim, one that challenges conventional thinking. But it arises from a simple observation. The evidence doesn't fully align with the explanations we've been given, because at the end of the day, the stones remain, silent, unchanging, holding within them marks, patterns, and details that continue to raise questions. Questions that don't have easy answers. Questions that push us to look beyond what we've accepted and consider what might be possible. And perhaps that's the most important part of this mystery. Not proving a specific theory, but recognizing that there is still so much we don't understand. Because if ancient civilizations truly had the ability to shape stone with such precision, to build on such a massive scale, using methods that leave behind evidence we can't fully explain, then our view of history is incomplete. And somewhere within that incomplete picture lies a truth hidden in the tools that shouldn't exist. And we're only just beginning to uncover it. What if one of the most advanced machines in human history was built over 2,000 years ago, not in a modern laboratory, not with electricity or computers, but in a time when humanity was supposedly limited to basic tools and simple mechanics? Imagine discovering a device so complex, so precise, that even today it challenges our understanding of ancient technology. A machine that doesn't just perform a simple task, but calculates, predicts, and maps the movement of the cosmos itself. It sounds impossible, and yet it's real. In the early 1900s, sponge divers exploring the waters off a small Greek island stumbled upon something unexpected, a shipwreck. Among the remains of statues, pottery, and ancient cargo, they found a strange, corroded object. At first glance, it looked like nothing more than a lump of metal, damaged and unremarkable. But decades later, when scientists took a closer look using X-ray imaging, they uncovered something extraordinary hidden inside. Gears, dozens of them, interlocking, intricate, and incredibly precise. This object would later be known as the Antikythera mechanism, often described as the world's first mechanical computer. And from the moment it was studied in detail, it raised a question that still hasn't been fully answered. How could such a device exist in a time when nothing else even remotely like it was known to exist? The mechanism dates back to around 200 BC. That alone is shocking, but what it was capable of makes it even more difficult to explain. This wasn't just a simple tool. It was a system, a carefully engineered network of gears designed to track celestial movements. By turning a crank, the user could predict the positions of the sun, the moon, and possibly even planets. It could forecast eclipses, map lunar cycles, and align astronomical events with a level of accuracy that shouldn't have been possible for that time period. Think about that. Thousands of years ago, someone designed and built a device that could model the movements of the heavens, without modern instruments, without digital systems, without any of the technological foundation we rely on today. And yet, it worked. The craftsmanship alone is enough to raise questions. The gears inside the mechanism are incredibly small, finely cut, and precisely aligned. Each tooth had to be shaped with exact measurements. Each component fitted perfectly to interact with the others. Even a slight error would have thrown off the entire system. This level of precision suggests not just skill, but a deep understanding of engineering, mathematics, and astronomy. But here's where the mystery deepens. There are no other devices like it from that time. Nothing that shows a gradual development leading up to it. No simpler versions. No prototypes. No clear evolution. It appears in the historical record, fully formed. And then, nothing. For over 1,000 years after creation, there is no evidence of similar machines being built. It's as if this knowledge existed briefly, and then vanished. Historians have struggled to explain this gap. Some suggest that the knowledge required to build the mechanism may have been lost due to wars, disasters, or the collapse of civilizations. Others believe it may have been limited to a small group of individuals, scholars or engineers whose work was never widely shared. But these explanations don't fully resolve the mystery, because creating something this advanced isn't just about knowledge, it's about infrastructure. Tools, techniques, and systems are required to produce components with such precision. You don't just build a device like this in isolation. It implies the existence of a broader technological capability, one that we haven't found clear evidence of, and that raises a possibility that many find difficult to accept. What if this wasn't the only one? What if there were more devices like it? Machines designed for different purposes, built using the same principles, but lost to time. The Antikythera mechanism may not be an anomaly. It may be a fragment, a surviving piece of a much larger, more advanced system of knowledge that once existed. Some researchers have even suggested that the mechanism represents a level of understanding that rivals early modern science. The ability to track celestial cycles requires precise observation, accurate data, and complex mathematical modeling. These are not simple achievements. They reflect a sophisticated approach to understanding the universe, one that we typically associate with much later periods in history. So how did ancient engineers acquire this knowledge? Was it developed independently, through careful observation over generations? Was it inherited from an earlier civilization, one whose records have been lost? Or does it point to something else entirely, something beyond the conventional narrative of human progress? Because when you place the Antikythera mechanism alongside other ancient mysteries, the precision of Egyptian stonework, the unexplained construction techniques at sites like Pumapunku, the possible use of sound and energy in ancient accounts, a pattern begins to emerge. A pattern that suggests our ancestors may have had access to knowledge that we are only now beginning to rediscover. And if that's true, then the story of human history becomes far more complex. Not a simple progression from primitive to advanced, but a cycle. Periods of knowledge, followed by loss. Moments of brilliance, followed by disappearance. The Antikythera mechanism stands as a reminder of that possibility. A physical object, undeniable in its existence, challenging us to rethink what we believe about the past. It forces us to ask uncomfortable questions, to look at history not as a fixed narrative, but as a puzzle, one with missing pieces. Because if a machine like this could exist over 2,000 years ago, what else existed that we haven't found? What knowledge was lost? And more importantly, what if we're not as advanced as we think we are? Perhaps we are not at the peak of technological achievement, but simply rediscovering what once was. And if that's the case, then the past may hold answers to questions we haven't even thought to ask yet. This is not just a story about an ancient device. It's a glimpse into a forgotten world of knowledge, a world that challenges everything we think we know, and we've only just begun to uncover it. Part 5, Final CTA, 100 words, high impact. What if everything you've just seen is only a fraction of the truth? From rivers that stopped, to walls that collapsed with sound, to machines that shouldn't exist, these aren't just stories, they are clues. Clues pointing toward a past far more advanced than we've ever imagined. And if this knowledge once existed, it could exist again. The real question is, are we ready to uncover it? If you want to dive deeper into secrets history tried to hide, hit subscribe to Mystery of the Ancients, watch the full series, and join the search. Because the truth isn't gone, it's waiting to be discovered.